Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn. Before I get started, I want to say that if you haven't been here before, below in the descriptions, you'll find all kinds of information about me, my website, the books I've written. I have a newsletter in the link below, and you can look at that. And also, if you are interested in sharing this with other people, there's a link in the descriptions below that you can send to other people so that they can join us if you want, or they can watch this at another time. So welcome. I see one person's here, and let me know if you will who you are in the chat so I can say, hello, how are you? I'm glad to see you. This month is June of 2021. And I am focusing this month on relationships and spirituality and spiritual dilemmas and challenges and the like. So today, the question is, what to do when your partner has different spiritual beliefs? So it's kind of a question. It's kind of like, what do you do when your partner has different spiritual beliefs? So I want to kind of look at this in a couple of different ways. First of all, our partner could be somebody that we're married to, or a boyfriend, girlfriend. A partner could be a friend, a best friend. It could be a sister, brother, parents, aunts and uncles. Partners could be a lot of different kinds of people. And hi, Isha, you're here. Hello, nice to see you. Our partners can be community people, perhaps that we were in a community with, or are in a community with, a spiritual community or another kind of community. My niece Megan, when I was beginning this whole series of spiritual dilemma videos, I emailed her or called her actually and said, hey, what do you think of this idea? And she goes, well, my friends and I, we never talk about spirituality because a couple of them are atheists. And so we just kind of don't talk about it. So that's a really good example of partners, if you will, or friends that where there's a difference in perspective. And so you don't talk about it. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So today we're going to talk about partners. So as I was just distinguishing in this, partners can be your community, your friends, parents, loved ones, children, even. We all can have different perspectives, and so it can get challenging or not in terms of how we be with our partners and the differences in how we might see spirituality and how someone else might see spirituality. So, hi, Fred. Nice to see you. I'm waving at the chat. That's what I'm waving at. So, hi, Fred. Nice to see you. So, our spiritual beliefs are the two things I want to sort of speak to here in the introduction, if you will, is here's what partners are in what I'm talking about, and in the chat and or in the comments below, if you're dealing with a specific partner, husband, wife, partnering, or spouse, it would be great to have you distinguish that with me so that if you want to talk about that specifically, we can do that. So what to do when your partner has different spiritual beliefs. So even within, hi, Marge, I see you. Or I should say, I see you, Marge. Even when we're in the same spiritual traditions, spiritual practices, there can be a different way of perceiving spirituality. I grew up Catholic, and it wasn't okay in my family for me to have different perspectives on religion or spiritual beliefs or on sin or hell and all of those kinds of things. It wasn't okay. And so that whole conversation kind of just, it created a huge rift in the relationship with my parents. And my brothers and sisters never talked about it. So it was sort of an ignored situation, as opposed to here's something that's so important to us, truly, and we ignore it. I guess it's like, if we are part of the um, LBGTQ community, but our families don't want to know about it, or they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to deal with it, then it kind of all gets kind of put aside. And spirituality is really a huge aspect of who we are in our being, that it goes ignored quite often for ourselves and in our relationships with our family and partners, because we don't know how to talk about it, much like we don't know how to talk about gender issues, even though that seems to be getting a little bit easier for people because of um, so much social media and so much information out in the world. You'd think that spirituality would be easier to talk about as well, but there's still so much energy where we get triggered, that a lot of times it's not okay to talk about it. So if there's any particular questions that you have or thoughts that you have that you'd like me to address today in this time together, I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll just sort of go through my notes and we'll see where we go. So let's talk about relationships again. So generally speaking, why are we in relationships, and what creates relationships? Well, there's the relationship of that man and a woman has a child, and now there's this relationship with a child. The child meets another child, they become friends. There's those kinds of bonding, connecting kinds of things that happen, partly out of biology, partly because out of environment or closeness, proximity. We develop friends perhaps at work or in our spiritual institutions, our spiritual communities. We create relationships out of attraction, the attraction in terms of physical. We fall in love with people, and that's very exciting and all. So relationships come from that. Relationships are formed for companionship and affection, and it's also formed for financial reasons. A lot of marriages are arranged marriages, or are arranged based on finances, or I want to marry somebody who's rich, so I'm going to marry this person. So a lot of these elements are elements of relationship that has nothing to do with how well we communicate or how well we get to know a person. We might not care about their spiritual ideas, their spiritual beliefs. We just want them to be sexy. We want them to be powerful. We want them to be rich. We want them to be stable, those kinds of things. And the spiritual elements may not be relevant at all to you. And if it's not, you're probably not watching this. But for those of you who are watching this is like, what do we do with in a sense? I'm trying to stay simple with this, and in a sense of our relationships can be based on a lot of different things where spiritual beliefs may not be a part of it. I think the more engaged we are with our own spiritual truths, our own spiritual knowings, our spiritual traditions and beliefs, that we would engage with a person in a way, let's say when we're meeting somebody or thinking about marrying or companioning with somebody, that we go, well, what are your beliefs about this? And how do you look at this? But too often it doesn't come up until later, in a sense. This is my experience, and somebody else might, again, there's that sense of this could be a really good thing. Or even if you met somebody at church or at the mosque or wherever you practice your spiritual practice, you can begin to engage with a person based on that sense of truth, that there's a connection there. But even within the practice or the religion, a spiritual religion, we'll say, let's say Judaism, there's a whole range of beliefs from very Hasidic and very very structured to very casual kind of relationship with spirituality. So in most religions, there's this whole bandwidth of belief systems, and people can fall wherever, even within any particular. To say I'm Muslim, to say, well, tell me more about that. How are you practicing that? How often do um, you pray? How often do you do what you do? Um, and everyone will be different. So number one is we're looking at what's a relationship, and what is your relationship based on? It's your relationship based on connection and love and the forming of deeper communication, deeper knowing, deeper bond. Is that what you're interested in? Deeper intimacy, and intimacy, not in so much the sexual element, but that can come in to this, but the intimacy of sharing your deepest truths, your deepest thoughts in a place of that you feel safe and you feel respected. And so intimacy plays a really huge role when we can deepen our own expression of ourselves within a relationship, whether that's with our significant other or a child or parent or friends or community. So why we are in relationship is that we're partnering on all of those levels, sometimes all the above, and sometimes more specifically one of them. When our partners have different spiritual beliefs, what are some options? What are some things that can happen? We can look at them and say, well, you're wrong. That's not true. You're stupid to think that way, or you're ignorant. A lot of people who are atheists sometimes think that people who believe in us in energies and God and Jesus and beings beyond this physical form, they think we're idiots. They think we're ignorant, that we don't know what we should know. So we can be judged, or we can judge each other. We can make people feel guilty. They can make us feel guilty. We can make them feel wrong, and we can diminish their sense of self. Those are some things that we can do that happens quite often in relationships when there's differences. Now, the thing is that if there's every partnership is made up of two separate cultures. This was I was a practicing family therapist for a very long time, and one of the things that was really fascinating, and this was also in the book I mentioned last week, which was Families and How to Survive Them by John Cleese, is that a family is in itself a culture. It's the people in this family have been entrained and tuned, imprinted with certain practices, with certain traditions and rituals and thoughts and memories and beliefs, and that family is in usually ensconced, if you will, in a larger culture. Could be the culture of faith, the religion, the culture of where they come from, the culture of finance and wealth. Those kinds of things all contribute to how one is within their culture. And when this person is then engaged or married to this person, there is a meeting of different cultures, a meeting of different belief systems, a meeting of different, if you're two different genders, there's a meeting of the masculine and the feminine. If it's two of the same gender, it's a meeting of different orientations in terms of the genders. So we're always meeting as two different cultures, but we assume that because we're all Americans here. We're all people here. And so when you get married, here's what people who get married do. And you're supposed to just love each other, and it's all going to be happy. And we all like meatloaf, and we all like fish and chips. We all like mushrooms in our hamburger. It's like, well, no, that's not actually true, but we don't realize that till we get beyond our assumptions that, oh, if I love you and you love me, we're going to like the same thing. We're going to want the same amount of children. We're going to want to work hard together to make our garden outside you love me, I love you. We're going to want to do it the same. And that's a huge assumption that we have. We have that with our parents. I would, I want my parents had wanted my parents to want what I wanted. I just assumed that's what they would want. And it doesn't work that way. We all are unique human beings. We are all unique energies. We are all unique expressions of aspects of the divine. We are all unique in our expression. So even in what I'm saying here, I'm speaking from, we're all aspects of the divine in a sense. God dwells within me as me. God dwells within you as you. I'm talking from a non-dual. I mean, I can talk about it in terms of a one God, or I can talk in terms of non-duality, which is there's no one God. It's only oneness. Now, that's a huge challenge in relationships to go, no, there's a God. I know there's a God. And another person goes, there's no God. There's just God is me. I'm God, and I'm the expression. And we can have these kinds of experiences, these perspectives, beliefs, intuitions, senses, this knowing, and it's what is true for each of us. So in the bottom line is none of us are wrong. We all have our own sense of what's true. Um, I I sometimes get confused by how people see and perceive things, but that doesn't make them wrong, and it doesn't make me wrong or stupid because I can't understand that. It just means we all have a different, unique perspective. So when it comes to partnerships, we can. This is that point where we go, wait a second, I thought you believed like I did. I thought because you were Christian and I was Christian that we had the same orientation. And it's like, or being Jewish. It's like, wait, you're Jewish, I'm Jewish, but wait, this you think differently than I do. And that's what happens quite often is we're in some ways the same, and so we make assumptions in that about the context of that sameness. I'm the same as you, so we think this way, as opposed to we have a same perspective in terms of Christianity or Muslim or Judaism or whatever it is, but we're seeing it differently even within that context. So it gets very interesting. Part of the question that was, I think, part of the question of this question is how do you be with people, with partners who have different beliefs than you, is when it gets to a point where it's conflicting. So so what I'm trying to say here is if we are in alignment with our spiritual principles, and most religions, love is the number one principle of almost all religions. I think it's the principle of all religions, the number one. But fear is also an element of most religions as well. In a sense, you love God, but you have to love God, which means now I'm afraid that if I don't love God enough, now I'm in trouble. So if there's any sense of fear-basedness in my relationship with my spiritual traditions and beliefs, then it's like, wait, now there's going to be somebody who's wrong or bad or ignorant or stupid or guilty, those kinds of things. And this is where it plays into challenges in a relationship. So if love is the only thing that matters within any religion or spiritual tradition, then my partner can have their own perspective, and it doesn't matter because I love them and I want them to feel whole, and I want them to feel connected to what's important and what's true for them. But if I'm afraid, now I'm going to do something else. And that fear again could be they're going to go to hell if they don't do A, B, and C, or we have to believe, just the bottom line of we have to believe the same thing. How are we going to raise our children if we don't believe the same thing? How are we going to um, create a sense of value and principles if we don't value the same thing and have the same spiritual principles. I would love some feedback because this is a lot of information I'm sharing very quickly. And would love to hear what's true for you there out there. And while you're at it, if you haven't already subscribed, I would love it if you would subscribe so that you can receive notifications when these lives and the other videos are coming up. But also, if you would give me a thumbs up as well, excuse me, that allows me to know that what I'm saying is valuable. Excuse me. Sorry. There are spiritual communities. Excuse me. Went down the wrong way. A client of mine has been a member of a spiritual community for years, and she was very engaged and connected to that spiritual community. But over time, she realized that what was the foundations and what was the connections and the personalities and the dynamics of this particular tradition wasn't jiving with her anymore. She wasn't connecting with it anymore. And so over time, she decided that she wanted to leave this community. Now, this has been a foundation of her her social life, in a sense, and her personal life for a very long time. Her partner was connected to this as well. And so she has decided to leave this organization. And now she's this person with an identity of her own, saying, this doesn't work for me. But now she's in a question, and she's in a dilemma. It's like, how do I relate to these people who have been part of my life for years? How do I be me and still be open to the connections of the relationships that I had? This is a dilemma for people. When I left the Catholic Church, big dilemma in terms of how is my mother, and mostly my mother, how am I going to relate to this person when there's such a divisiveness in the way that we see the way that we live the world. I think we saw the world similarly, but the way we lived it was very different. Marge says, if I had this understanding that seeing things differently was okay 50 years ago, we might have avoided 90% of our disagreements. Isn't that true? If I had this understanding 50 years ago, we might have avoided 90% of our disagreements. Thanks for saying that, Marge. Because I think that I think I'm the same way, and that there's supposed to be a right way, and that right way is usually my way. As my partner said, no, this is the right way. This is the way we're going to do things. So that created that sense of somebody's wrong. And if somebody's wrong, then there's a shaming and a guilting. And so it's not just, okay, you're wrong, or, we can see this as different. We can see this differently, but somebody is going to be diminished in that process. Somebody is going to be shamed, or just belittled because of their beliefs, because their perspective is different. And so in relation, and this is true not only in terms of our spirituality, but if we're arguing about spirituality, we're probably arguing about the kids, or about money, or about food, or what to eat, or recipes, what tastes good, what doesn't, when just how we do life together or how we do life separately. Um, so there's a lot of arguments, and if there's a tendency towards, this is how we deal with disagreements, this is how we deal with differences, we ignore it, or we fight about it, or we talk about it, or we go to a therapist and they'll talk to us about it. We'll get advice on how to do this. Um, there's different ways of being with this challenge of having different perspectives, different beliefs. And so it's just fascinating. And as a therapist, it was very challenging, family therapist, marriage therapist, to be working with people who learned how to be in disagreement, basically in terms of isolating, and we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to go in our different directions in terms of that. And then we come back together and it's like, hi, honey, how was your day? But we're not talking about the issue, whether it's religion, spirituality, children. I don't want any more children. We've got to spend less money. Whatever those issues are, there's a pattern of relating to each other in relation to the issue at hand. And today we're just happen to be talking about spirituality and different beliefs. But there's so much possibility to engage with curiosity and fascination, as opposed to saying you're wrong and I'm right. So coming back to my client who has left this spiritual practice, spiritual tradition, and she goes, I don't know how I'm going to be able to be with these people. And it's what happens is we get triggered. If people will say things, we get triggered. So this is sort of the gist, I think, of this conversation today, is somebody will say something and then I'll get triggered, or I call it ignited. Something gets ignited within me that makes me upset, anxious, upset, guilty, upset, fear based, upset, just sad, angry. Something somebody says will ignite me. So from a spiritual perspective, if we are all about learning respect, kindness, compassion, empathy, learning to listen, learning to understand, learning to connect and engage, not in terms of I have to believe what you believe, but that place of, can I be with you and engage with you from acceptance that you have your perspective and I have mine? Can I accept that, wow, that's a really interesting way of looking at life, or at spirituality. It's a really interesting way of seeing things and perceiving, without having to lose my sense of self, without having to give anything up, in honoring and respecting and allowing you to have your own personal perspectives. That's, in a sense, a foundation of spiritual practice, is coming to this place of not conflict, but engagement, connection, engaged connection, as I call it. I've been watching on public television and talking about Europe, the conquests, and all of the the so many religious wars, which is crazy making. I mean, it says it's about God, but it's probably more about money and power. But it's like all of the hate and all of the anger and all of the violence and all of the, because you think differently. It's just, it doesn't make sense when you're looking at what's the point of God, what's the point of spirituality, is this knowing of our divineness and our connection in love. And so we've learned this, and at the same time, we're trained to learn this, to say, yes, that's what's true. Honor your father and your mother. I could recite the 10 Commandments, right? But But to love and truly honor the people that are important to you, that's a huge deal. But it's very difficult. In the Course in Miracles, in the book A Course in Miracles, it talks a great deal about special relationships. I have a boyfriend and he's really special and it's all great. Or my family in terms of special relationships. But we cultivate, so many of us cultivate special relationships, not based on love. I love this person, but I'm afraid to lose something. And so I diminish to themselves, to them, I diminish them in some way. Oh, that's really stupid. Oh, that's really dumb. Why do you think that way? Why do you do that? In that kind of tone that says, I know better, in a righteousness. And quite often we don't even know we're doing it because it's so ingrained. We've been entrained in watching people, watching our family perhaps talk to each other that way, and attend to each other in a way of dismissiveness, as opposed to that place of, I love you, and so I'm going to honor you always. Even when we're disagreeing, I'm going to work at understanding you versus trying to get you to understand me. So in the Course in Miracles, they're talking quite a bit about the special relationship and how we are not in a place of forgiveness, in a sense of givingness, and in that state of honoring, but we are in the state of, you're wrong, you're bad, you're guilty. So if you think about how you be in your relationship with your special relationships, just notice, for instance, how often you do that. Now, when I was reading the Course in Miracles, and I've been reading it for over 30 years, so as I read the Course in Miracles, I should say, but when I began and I was really really hooked into special relationships, I had to be with a boyfriend or be married, that kind of thing. When I was looking at this material in terms of, hey, it's all about love, why are you doing this? And I'd go, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing that. I'm very loving. I'm very compassionate and empathetic. But when I started to look at my languaging and the amount of time that I spent in resentment and in disrespect and putting that person down and trying to get them to be different than who they were, I probably spent more than 50% of my time trying to get this person to be different. I did not spend that time. I mean, I would say not 50%. I would say probably 7%, if I'm being truly honest with you. 70% of the time I was trying to get this person to be different than who they are. That's not love. That's not love. And that's not respect. And so we may be doing this, you may be doing this and not aware of it. Maybe you are a person that is completely free of that kind of engagement in your spiritual relationship, in your relationships. And I really hope that's true. But it's interesting when you start to explore how your thinking is and where you're spending your attention, where you're putting your attention on. It's really fascinating to see how a lot of it has to do with the fact that somebody is different. Your partners or your children or whoever is different than you, and how you want to fix them, change them, get them to see life differently, get them to see God differently, those kinds of things. So it's really interesting. And so that, in a sense, is the intention of this conversation, is to support and empower you to look at how you be with people, the people that are important to you, especially your partners, when they have different beliefs than you do. Now, of course, they're going to have different beliefs than you, because most of us do, right? I mean, because we're different, we're unique. But our assumptions and our consensus view of reality, our assumption is that we're all the same. But then there's that distinction of, well, you're a person of color, or you're a person of different gender, or you're a different religion. But so we can explore that and say, hey, what's that like? What makes you, what's it like being you? What's it like? What's true for you in that difference, as opposed to saying you're different, you're wrong, you're different, you're bad. So this is one of the challenges that we face in relationships with our partners and our families, with everybody. It's part of the social issues and the social justice issues that are happening, especially in the United States, but all over the world, is this place of beginning to understand, beginning to want to understand versus wanting to be understood. If you only understood what it was like to be me, you would want to do A, B, and C. If you only understood how I'm looking at things, then you would do things differently, because I know I'm the right person. A lot of my time has been spent practicing righteousness. I've been very, very good at practicing righteousness. That didn't make me good, it just made me righteous. It didn't make me effective in relationships. It didn't bring about more harmony. It doesn't bring about more harmony when you're in righteousness. It doesn't bring about connection or engagement when we're in righteousness. It just doesn't. Just I'm right. So we can be right and we can be in relationship. In a sense, I know what I know for myself, and I can honor and respect you for knowing and knowing what's right for you and what's good for you. I can honor that. Now, can we live together with those differences? That's another question, isn't it? It's we think that if we love somebody, then we have to live. This is sort of generalized. If I love you and I'm married, have to marry you and I have to live with you. It's like that's it. But when we have our differences, can we still live together with those differences? Can I honor you and still live with you with your differences? Or can I honor you, but I can't live with you because it doesn't work for me? This is a place where we begin to say, where we get to honor both people. It's like a marriage we think is forever, and we make those connections, but it's, in terms of statistics, it's not forever for most people. But it's like I can honor you and respect you, and I can't live with you. I lived for the majority of my second marriage, we lived apart. And because I loved the guy, I just totally loved him so much, but I couldn't live with him. And so we had a lovely relationship as long as it lasted, living separately. And then it got to a point where that wasn't going to work either, because we became more and more clear about what was true for us. In our spiritual beliefs were part of that. A large part of our relationship was based on spiritual practices and spiritual connection. It was really quite wonderful. But there got to be a place where there was too much difference and we needed to go in our different ways. And so, part of this conversation is, what do we do when our partners have different spiritual beliefs? It's like, well, we can honor them, we can respect them, we can beat them up and say, no, you're wrong. Or we can say, I love you and I respect you, and I need to separate. I need to not live with you anymore. I can love you and, maybe keep the relationship, but not live together, or we just need to separate and maybe go our own ways. So I'll take a breath. And if you have something to say, or if you have something to share with a like, that would be great. Let me know that what I'm saying makes sense and is landing or is working for you or helpful. Please give me a thumbs up. That would be really lovely. So those are the challenges, is like to say, I love you and I respect you, and I see, thank you for the thumbs up. I see how you're looking at the world, and it's different than the way I see the world. And it's, we can do this. I can do this with you. Can you do this with me? And let's see how we can work this out. This is where we're learning and growing our capacities to expand our abilities and our capacities to know love and know each other in that in the greater sense of knowing. Does that make sense? If we can talk to each other and communicate in a way that grows understanding, then we can say, I understand, and I that makes perfect sense, and I can live with that. A person, a friend of mine was married to a man who realized that he was gay, and so that was something that difference, very big difference, and they couldn't stay together. They had to separate so that he could find the partnership that he needed. So there's elements of life which give us the capacity. There's challenges that give us the capacity to learn who am I in here? How am I being with this? What's true for me? What's my level of tolerance of differentness? Can I be can this be different without it being irritating? Can this be something that I grow to appreciate and love and accept? These are big questions, and we can't know it. So even in a sense, the title of this live, how do you be with a person with different partner with different spiritual beliefs? It's like we don't know until we get into it, but we have more opportunities to grow through that versus living in fear and anger and bitterness and frustration. And I didn't know this about you. If you had told me about this, I wouldn't have, those kinds of things. But going, oh, okay, this is interesting. I want to hear more. I want to know more about that so that I can appreciate and accept it, appreciate and allow it, or appreciate and grow myself to be with this in a way that works perhaps for both of us, or gives me an opportunity to say, no, this really doesn't work for me, and I need to do something different. So those are some of the elements that show up in this dynamic. I do want to come back to my client I was talking about who left her spiritual practice tradition and is in this dilemma and question about, how am I going to be with these people that have been my friends and connections? Am I going to isolate myself? Am I going to separate myself? Am I going to allow myself to be present with them and have conversations perhaps that will bring about understanding, and or understanding that isn't going to grow our relationships? We have a lot of different opportunities, but when in her leaving, she becomes, in her context, a separate. She now is separate. And when we start to separate ourselves out, we can get scared. But we're the ones that are doing the separating, the separating. And so if we look at that and go, okay, I'm getting triggered by this part that says they're going to reject me. It's like, that's my thought. And this is my truth, that I've chosen this path because this is my truth. And can I keep walking this truth even though I may be rejected? Can I allow myself to engage in a way that potential honest communication and understanding can happen? And there may be some that will reject me. But does that mean I'm rejectable? Is that, that's where where things get messy. And because we get caught in, well, I might be rejected. It's like, well, you've chosen the path. You've taken the steps to follow through with that. And that's honoring yourself. And honoring yourself then is allowing yourself to have potential conversations that honor you, and it honors them too. When we go, oh, I'm afraid of getting rejected, we're not open to the possibility that there won't be rejection. Maybe there'll be more inclusiveness, because maybe there'll be more understanding in such a way that people will go, I've been thinking the same way, but I've been afraid to acknowledge it. So in being able to be true to our path and true to our experience and honor it. And yes, there is a fear of rejection, but then we go, wait a second, I'm the one that chose this path. So there's likelihood 50% of the people are going to reject me. 50% of the people are going to embrace me and applaud me. What am I going to do with that? So it's a place of practice. It's a place of an opportunity to learn and grow in the truth of our knowing, truth of the alignment of what we've chosen for ourselves, the truth of our aligning with the beliefs that work for us, that are honoring to us. Does that make sense? Welcome to those who have joined me in this time. It's good to see you. If you'd say hello, that would be great. You don't have to. If there's any comments that you guys have in terms of what you've heard me say in these 45 minutes, I would be very happy to hear what you have to say. If you have thumbs up that you can give me in terms of what I'm saying and it makes sense to you and working for you, that would be great to give me a thumbs up for that. That'd be great. So what we've covered so far is that we have relationships, and relationships are based on our cultural patterns of our life, and we meet somebody and we're in relationship to somebody else, whether it's a special relationship or a work relationship or our children. We come up with different cultural perspectives. My culture is so different than my daughter's culture, so different. And I think that's true for her and her son, who's only 10. But the culture of those beings is so different. But we expect that because we're living together or have been, mother, daughter, whatever, that we would have the same ideas and perspectives. So different. And am I wrong? No, I'm not wrong. Is she wrong? No, she's not wrong. It's very different. And to appreciate that difference rather than going, gosh, how could she want to? She loves living in the city. I love living in the country. Like, why isn't she more like me? Those kinds of things. So number one is we have all these different relationships, but they're all based on that we're unique human beings in relation to another unique human being. And we have our different ideas and beliefs, whether it's about spirituality or about work or children or about life in general. We have different ways of perceiving and believing and interpreting. And so we can either celebrate the differences, celebrate the unique ideas of another person, or we can make them wrong, make ourselves righteous and powerful in a sense, and diminish their power and make them wrong and guilty and shameful. We can love them, we can expand their sense of value and their own sense of worth and joy, or we can diminish it. That's our choice of how we want to engage with other people, especially our significant others. Love is the foundation of most spiritual traditions and religious practices, but where there's also a lot of fear in a lot of our religions, and that fear makes that right, wrong, good, bad thing happen, which gets in the way of partnerships. Is like, I was taught this way, and if you don't believe that, then there's something wrong with you. Those kinds of things, and it gets scary, and it gets about rejection and abandonment and all of that kind of stuff. And what I'm wanting to leave you with is this sense of, I can actually engage in this conversation in a way that grows our capacity to listen, grows my capacity to listen, my capacity to be curious, my capacity to understand, my capacity to allow someone their differences, my capacity to accept what I cannot change, and my capacity to, in a sense, live in serenity and tranquility, even though there's differences. Now, if there's differences are creating harm or danger to you or the another person, that's not so good. Now you got to make some changes. But when there's that place of, it's just difference opinion, we can honor that difference. That's a very good thing. So what there is to learn when, in a sense, being confronted by other people's differences, especially their spiritual differences, is we can learn to question, and not question in terms of, is that true or is that right? But just like, wow, being fascinated with another person's perspective. This is what I do for a living, is be fascinated and curious about people's perspective, how people see things, what makes them think the way they do. I'm a thinking partner for a lot of people. And so I engage in conversations to help me see how they think. As a thinking partner, I want to know, how do you think about this? How do you be with this? How do you do that? Because that helps me understand them. And in that understanding, something shifts and an engaged connection then happens, and the relationship evolves. And that's what I want. And because in that involvement, my client is evolving into who they are in their fullest expression, and on and on and on. And the same with me. We have values and we have priorities. And looking at our priorities and the values that we have, our spiritual principles, love is higher than righteousness. Is that true? That's something for you to ask yourself. If you want to be right, when I was training to be a family therapist, they'd say, you can be right or you could be in relationship. And for me, as a person that was pretty shame-based and guilt-based, that was very difficult. But now I can see I can actually be right about my position, my perspective, and allow another person to be right about theirs, and learn to create relationship based on both of us being honored and respected in that. But we're looking at our values. What are our higher values? This is a really big question in this, because it's like, this is a whole nother video live in terms of how do we describe love? What is love? Is love power? Is love ownership? Is love all of that? Or is love something else? So, but if we look at love as an honoring and a respecting and a contributing to another person's well-being, is my diminishing their self-worth in alignment with that value? So we can start to ask ourselves those kinds of questions. Choosing to stay in relationships. I mean, for some people, relationships based on or the religious elements or spiritual elements of a relationship are important. And it may be a point where it's not going to work for a couple. And so that's really an important element. When I was in my teens and I told my mother I wasn't going to go to church anymore, she basically broke up with me. She didn't talk to me for 3 weeks, and we lived in the same house. And that was an interesting challenge to go through. We never, ever talked about it again. It never got resolved. It just dropped. And it didn't support and enhance our relationship because of the divisiveness, the division of perspective, without the willingness to understand and accept and allow. This big work for parents and children, for sure. Hi, Alyssa. Nice to see you. Alyssa is my daughter, if you don't know, so she's here. So thanks for being here. We're just talking about parents and children, and my mom and my divisiveness with my mom. Being able to, so the last piece of this is being able to shift your perspective, shift the way that you're looking at this question and looking at yourself, and so that you can allow your partner their own truth and allow the space Um, yeah, we were talking about you, but not specific. Well, yes, we were talking about you, but we were talking about me too. Um, uh, so shifting your perspective so that you allow your partner their own truth. So again, this is not just like, oh yeah, I'll just flip the switch, but we're talking about how can I allow myself to be present in such a way that my partner can express or share their perspectives and their beliefs? How can I be in a way that allows that to happen? This was a big deal for me in a couple of my marriages where I realized that the way I was showing up was not allowing an open communication. Now, it wasn't all about me in that way, in a sense. I did make efforts, but I could see how my orientation was such that it didn't allow for that to happen in some ways. So when I can see it and go, wow, I really shut people down, um, then I have to be aware of that. I'm responsible for that dynamic. I'm responsible for that to happen. And it's like, I don't want to do that, especially, I mean, it's very challenging being a coach and therapist, because I have to do it as a profession. It's very different, as my daughter will tell you, trying to be a mom or just trying to be a person in relation to another person, her, and having it be like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. So I can do it as a profession, but there's a vulnerability and there's an openness and there's there's something else that could happen. I could get rejected or I could do it wrong, that makes relationships with our partners and our family members, people that are important to us, it makes it more challenging if we don't create that safe space for ourselves and for them. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. I got a little nervous, Lissa, when you jumped on. So it's really about how you're looking at yourself in this question of, how do I see myself as a spiritual being? How do I see myself in my spiritual practice? How am I opening myself up to my partner having their own orientation, their own perspective, their own truth? And will this potential enrich our relationship? And will it grow our relationship? Those are the questions that we can ask ourselves. So any last thoughts? And again, if you, Lissa says you're killing it. If this has been valuable to you, I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up. It lets me know that what I've said and this time together has been really valuable to you. So if you could give me a thumbs up, that would be really great. As I've mentioned, there's a link below in the descriptions to share with your friends if you think that this could be a valuable video for them. There's also a link below for my newsletter, so that if you want to stay connected with me through that, I'll be sending out a newsletter in a couple of weeks, and you'll receive that and stay more informed about whatever's happening, what's coming up. And we've got some exciting things coming up soon. So I think that's pretty much it for now. Thanks for being here. And if you have any other comments, if anything shows up, please leave comments below and I'd be happy to get back to you about that. Any questions that you have. Thanks so much. Bye for now.